Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our May 2nd, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Got a call to order. We have a quorum here tonight. We have 9 public hearings for tonight. And before we get started with our public hearings, I want to say if you're talking for an individual, you have 3 minutes. If you're talking for a group, you have 5 minutes. And tonight, the first on the agenda is zoning application for approximately 4 acres located along Osborne Lane to be rezoned RS-15 to RS-10. Randy Freshman, applicant. Matthew.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Wade. Good evening, Vice Chairman Wade and members of the Planning Commission. Our first public hearing tonight is a rezoning located on the north side of Osborne Lane. And I want to correct something. There was a typo in the agenda. The acreage is actually 5.8 acres. It is one parcel that's 4.8 acres and then an approximately 1 acre portion of the parcel to the north. This property was annexed into the city several years ago and came in with an interim zoning classification of RS-15. The property to the north, you'll see here the property to the north and to the west was zoned RS-10 last year and for the development of single-family homes. RS-10, of course, being single-family residential with minimum lot sizes of 10,000 square feet. The applicant has requested rezoning for the area colored in blue, which is the balance of one of the tracts that was rezoned to RS-10 last year. He wishes to incorporate the area colored in blue into his proposed single-family development, which is called Osborne Estates. Of course, the RS-15 zoning would permit single-family lots a minimum of 15,000 square feet. So increasing the density somewhat with slightly smaller lots going from a minimum of 15,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. Initially, when this property was annexed, the reason it was given the RS-15 zoning classification because at that time the owner did not want to sell the approximately 5 acre parcel to the applicant, and since then the owner is now looking to sell to Mr. Friedsam, and so that is why Mr. Friedsam is now making a request for the same zoning classification for the balance of the property that he made for the larger portion of the property that was zoned RS-10 back in 2017. The future land use map of the Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan recommends that the subject property develop as suburban residential, which does make provisions for single-family detached homes at a density of 2 to 3.54 dwelling units per acre, and it actually identifies RS-10 as one of the appropriate zoning classifications that is consistent with the suburban residential character classification of the comprehensive plan. With that being said, we need to conduct a public hearing on this matter tonight, and the Planning Commission needs to formulate a recommendation for the City Council. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Clyde Roundtree is here representing Mr. Friedsam, the applicant.
Mr. Roundtree, do you have anything?
Vice Chairman Wade, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree, also in Steel Engineering. As Matthew mentioned, this piece of property was really kind of in Mr. Friedsam's desire to have for the RS-10 development from the get-go. He's been responsive to Mr. Powers, the owner currently. There's a situation in their family that really prevented them from selling the home originally. And as Mr. Powers contemplated the decision to move forward with the property, Mr. Friedsam was, they both kind of an honored relationship to kind of work it out whenever that time came for the property to sell. So it will be a continuation of what already is being proposed for the estate's property, right adjacent, the adjacent property. And Mr. Friedsam is available as well if you have any questions for him. The character and quality of the house is going to be all masonry homes. We had a neighborhood meeting related to the previous property rezoning. Had a real good turnout with the neighbors, and we felt we could provide a nice product comparable to what would be consistent along Osborne Lane, and hopefully something that the neighbors on the adjacent properties could understand. And this is really the RS-10 basically to the west. You know, that's where we had our neighborhood meeting related specifically to that property. So we're going to keep the same character of product, home products, as was already approved basically by the neighbors on that particular piece. So if you have any questions for me, I'm here available for you. And if I can respond to anything that comes up during the public hearing, I will. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Roundtree from the commission? If not, we'll open our public hearing. It's now open. Anyone? If not, public hearing closed. What is the wishes of the commission?
Move for approval.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Zoning application PRD amended for Oak Haven PRD on approximately 5.01 acres located on Hancock Court, Cortland Coleman applicant.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Wade. Our next public hearing is a PRD amendment, and the property is located on the east side of Conhocken Court and is located to the north of the Plantation South subdivision and to the west of the Evergreen Farm subdivision. This tract, which is a little over 5 acres, was annexed into the city in 2007, and at that time it was approved for a PRD called Oak Haven. At that time, Mr. Denny Hastings was the developer. Mr. Hastings never moved forward with development, and the property has sat undeveloped ever since. As a little bit of background on the PRD itself that is currently in effect, it made provisions for 26 single-family attached townhome dwelling units with minimum square footages of 1,056 square feet of living area. The property was recently purchased, and the owner has a different vision for the property, although it keeps a lot of the same aspects of the existing PRD, such as the street configuration and the general location of the homes. However, one of the things that the applicant would like to do in implementing his vision for the property is increasing the density of the property or of the development from 26 units to 31 units. And that in and of itself requires an amendment to the PRD and approval by the Planning Commission and City Council. A little bit of background, a little bit of detail on the pattern book that was submitted before Mr. Caldwell with Reagan Smith and Associates gives a brief PowerPoint presentation. As I mentioned, they're increasing the density by 5 units, which goes from 5.2 dwelling units to 6.2 dwelling units per acre, an increase of 1 dwelling unit per acre. The minimum square footage for the units is also proposed to increase from 1,056 to 1,835 square feet. The units, some of the units in the previous PRD were single story. With this new product that the applicant is looking to build, they would all be 2-story townhome units. So therefore, he's able to utilize a smaller footprint, but actually get more living area, more square footage. The existing pattern book requires a minimum 75% brick or stone exteriors, with the remaining 25% consisting of vinyl siding. And the revised pattern book commits to 100% masonry, including brick and cementitious siding, with vinyl only allowed in the trim and soffits. It commits to carriage-style doors, and the architectural elevations are provided in the pattern book. Parking will be accommodated via garages and driveways, as well as guest parking areas. Each unit will have a 2-car attached garage and a driveway large enough to accommodate 2 vehicles. Solid waste will be handled via a dumpster, and there will be sidewalks on both sides of the proposed street. One of the other changes was in the existing PRD, the amenity that was proposed was a community garden. They're looking to change that to something that they think will be more functional for the residents, to include a gazebo and a fire pit with a seating area, so kind of a more formal gathering area. And they're looking to meet our minimum formal open space requirements, too, that are a part of our design guidelines. They're also proposing a 12-foot wide Type C buffer along the entire perimeter of the site, with the exception of the frontage along Conhocken. And the buffer will attempt to incorporate existing trees where possible. As I mentioned, Plantation South is located to the south of the subject property. It's zoned RS-12. Evergreen Farms is located to the east, and it is zoned RS-10. And the Franklin Heights and Plantation South Section 1 subdivisions, which are located in the unincorporated county, are located to the west and to the north. The future land use map contained in the Murfreesboro 2035 plan calls for the property to be developed as suburban residential, which, as I mentioned in the last item, recommends a density of 2 to 3.54 dwelling units per acre, and recommended development types include detached residential dwelling units and planned developments to provide other housing types, including auto-urban attached residential, but with increased open space to preserve a suburban character setting. The existing plan, 5.2 dwelling units per acre, and the proposed plan, 6.2 dwelling units per acre, both exceed the density recommended by the plan. It appears that the future land use map did not take into account the existing zoning for the property, which, as I mentioned, exceeds the density that's recommended by the future land use map. However, the applicant contends, and he will need to make his case during his presentation as to how the proposed use is consistent with the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. The applicant did conduct a neighborhood meeting on April the 16th at Scales Elementary School, and it was well attended. I'd say we had about 35 to 40 neighbors in attendance, and there was good dialogue and a lot of questions at that meeting. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing and then formulate a recommendation to the City Council. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Caldwell to the podium. He has a brief PowerPoint presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
Well, I'll hand it up here. Bear with me one second. All right, good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name again is Randy Caldwell with Reagan Smith. And just to let you know, tonight I also have with me Cortland Coleman and Jay Berger, who are in the audience, and they are actually the owners of the property and would be the ones who would be developing this if we do get through this process. I also have with me tonight Wes McGill, one of my associates and our project manager engineer, and I want him here tonight specifically to address some drainage issues that got brought up in the neighborhood meeting, and we want to make sure that y'all are satisfied with our approach, and we've met with Sam on that and can briefly go over that as well. So again, as Matthew said, just going through, and we'll make this brief. Again, just a reminder that this already is an existing planned residential development. Up there, basically you see the property, 5 acres, Evergreen Farms to the east, Plantation South to the south. Again, you can kind of see when I show you the next slide, it's a very heavily wooded piece of property, very oddly configured, so very limited as far as what you can actually fit on there. Actually, I don't know that it would really be possible to develop single-family lots on the property because of that, and it certainly wouldn't preserve the existing trees that are on there right now. There is a sinkhole right in the middle of the property, again, which we'll touch on, further limits the property. Just to look at it from an aerial context and see how it fits with the neighborhood, again, you can see how heavily vegetated it is, and keep in mind that sinkhole that's in the center. We also are further kind of confined by a waterline easement that runs through the south portion of the property that you can see in blue. And then the red lines indicate basically where sewer is to serve the property. So as Matthew said, again, PRD, this gives you just a little bit idea of where the property is in context. Again, the fact that it's zoned PRD. This may come in handy. I don't know if we'll have some discussions on overall traffic in the area. That was something that was brought up by the neighborhood, but thought we'd incorporate this slide just to kind of give you a better idea of where it is in context to Franklin Road, which you see to the north there. This is the currently approved plan. Again, as Matthew said, 26 units, primarily 1 story with a little bit mix of 2 stories. Some of the commitments that came with the property was preserving the perimeter tree rows that are in there. This was at that time envisioned as a gated community. And again, as Matthew mentioned, the open space component of this was a community garden. Again, we didn't feel that fit with the new vision that Cortland has for the property, nor does it really fit the description of what formal open space is in the new design guidelines. So we certainly had to take that into context. You'll see on the west side where there's that big gap between the trees, that is where that sinkhole is. And as Matthew said, basically these units in this average about 1,400 square feet when you look at the size of the units that were proposed for the property. Again, they were basically 1,000 square foot units, 1,300 square foot, and 2,400 square foot on there. We did have some, trying to save some existing trees internally, but after looking at that and seeing the impact that the roads would have on there, that's something we reevaluated as we looked at this. Our focus became more on looking at the perimeter edges where we felt that was more important to protect the neighborhood and help provide a buffer along those edges. Again, this is the new plan right here that you see. And again, and I'll show some side-by-side slides of this. Again, because of the fact that we're going 2 stories and these are smaller footprints, we were basically able to kind of fit these units within the footprints of what was previously approved on the site. In fact, in some cases, we were able to pull the buildings a little farther away from the eastern and northern edge as a result of that. As we met with staff, again, given the design guidelines, sidewalks are now required, so we basically have sidewalks on both sides of the street. We do have a mail kiosk that's a component of this right now. And again, Matthew mentioned on the formal open space, and that does meet the minimum percentage criteria that you have right now. Some things we also looked at, one of the approvals on the previous plan was a 10-foot chain link fence along the perimeter of the property, which I guess going back and looking at that, would almost look very institutional, as far as around that edge. And also it would probably be a challenge given the existing trees and wanting to save those trees to weave that in and out there. Again, we're committed. We'll have to do some supplemental planting around the perimeter, which we feel will provide the visual buffer there. There are really some fences already along the perimeter on some of the existing property owners, so we felt we were doubling up, and again, it wasn't screening anything as much as was keeping people out. So that's another change that we made to the property, or at least to the master plan. The entrance also, we went back and looked at it, didn't think that the gated entry really fit in context. Taking that out also enabled us to kind of push those buildings a little bit more towards the street there, and actually to the right of that block of buildings, as you'll see it on the previously approved plan, we were able to kind of get a little bit more open space there in that corner down by the mail kiosk. So that opened up a little bit more open space opportunity for the property. Again, architecturally, these are the black and white images. As Matthew mentioned, we are committed to 100% masonry on this with a combination of brick and hardy board on there. Even on the back side, you'll see that there's and we worked pretty hard with staff on kind of modifying these to get everybody satisfied. There is basically a brick, what I call water table at the lower end, at the lower side of it, going down to the ground up to the bottom of the windows, and then going to a hardy plank on the upper side. The side elevations, again, the first floor will actually be brick, and from up there will be the hardy board. So again, 100% masonry compared to the 75% commitment that was made on the previous proposal, plus vinyl siding was proposed for the side elevations on this as well. This again is an image of what these would look like. And again, we worked pretty hard with the staff on some of the detailing components of this to bring some of the brick up to the second level, adding light fixtures, doing some ledgers, basically a brick roll-lock ledge on the bottom to provide some relief. The image on the bottom, again, shows you the floor plans. We are able to fit 2 SUVs in there. And it's got the water tank in some closets that basically don't interfere with that. One of the reasons we went to the dumpster pad was because we could not fit the garbage cans in that, so we are committed to doing basically a dumpster pad on site that would take care of the garbage pickup on there. So, and we do have a materials board here that is brought just to give you an idea. Too heavy. Just to give you an idea of the materials and the colors, so very much almost some earth tone colors, just because of the setting that kind of plays into the tree preservation that we're trying to accomplish on the site as well. Again, what I want to do is just let Wes McGill, my associate and the engineer on the project, just talk to you a little bit about the storm drainage patterns and how we're planning to basically treat the water on the site.
Evening. Wes McGill with Reagan Smith, civil engineer for the project. Want to talk to you a little bit about stormwater. As Randy stated, right now there is a sinkhole on the site. It's almost right in the center of the site, and the current drainage pattern is going into that sinkhole. In the event that the sinkhole did clog, you can see on the PowerPoint presentation there is a blue line showing kind of the overflow pattern, natural drainage pattern, which would go out to the west into existing drainage channel and then on to the north. Understand there's some concerns with the neighbors about stormwater maybe draining onto their properties. So we met with staff and came up with a few alternative solutions that we think would address some of those concerns. We are proposing a detention pond to reduce the runoff rate that will go to the sinkhole, and then that sinkhole will apply for injection well, which would be permitted through the state of Tennessee. In the event that that sinkhole did fail, we are proposing an option A, which utilizes the on-site storm sewer to back up into an overflow structure, and if it ever got to an elevation of that height, it would overflow and then drain into the roadside ditch located in the right-of-way of Conhocken. There is an existing 16-inch water line that runs through the site, so some of this hasn't been fully designed. And if we were to not able to come up with a solution that didn't conflict with that water line, we are proposing an option B, shown on the right, which would kind of mimic the natural drainage pattern that exists today. It would be an emergency overflow if the sinkhole did flood and would drain out to the west into that channel and then on to the north. I also know there's some concerns about blasting. We are in a site that's a fill site. If there is blasting that needs to occur, it would be for the deeper utilities such as sewer. Those contractors would need to be permitted through Murfreesboro and the State Tennessee Fire Marshal's Office. They'd also need to follow the regulations of the National Fire Protection Agency, which regulates the use of the explosives, transportation, and storage, and then also provide a pre-blast survey for any structures located within 300 feet of the blasting area.
And just this next slide, if you can put that up there on the screen, basically shows the previously approved plan and the proposed plan side by side, just to give you kind of a feel for what the differences are. And actually, with this new plan, again, we actually are accomplishing a little bit more open space. The previous site had 56%. This one has 57%. So again, we're able to kind of keep the integrity of that. We're able to keep the integrity of the preservation of the perimeter trees as part of that. And again, on the east and north side, actually, we've got some greater setbacks than what we had previously. So again, just some notes that we thought you'd want to consider as part of this. Just highlights the difference, again, going from 26 units to 31. We are not getting it. We are still doing a nice, if you look in the pattern book, there's still pretty extensive signage treatment along the front with stone columns, wrought iron fence, pretty extensive landscaping along the front. So still committed to doing that. Again, we're proposing to remove the chain link fence. I think you might hear some folks that might want some sections of fencing there just to keep people out of the area. Much more, I think, a formal open space that certainly meets the intent of the design guidelines as what was compared to previously. Definitely an upgrade from what we had previously on the previously approved plan. Again, 5-foot sidewalk where there was no sidewalk. Again, the average unit size, 1,410 square feet versus 2,000 square foot. So a much bigger product, much more expensive product, which should help home values in there compared to what was previously approved on the site. Again, 75% masonry on the previous effort. This will be all 100% masonry. And again, when you start looking at the elevations, what was proposed before with the vinyl siding, no vinyl siding proposed as part of this. Again, I would welcome Cortland up here if he wants to make any presentation, but he's here to answer any questions as the owner, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, or as you go through the public hearing, we'll be here to hopefully address any concerns that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. We're now ready to open our public hearing. Public hearing is now open. Please state your name and address.
My name is Joseph Plummer. I live at 304 Franklin Heights Drive, a county resident. On the plans, it would show as Lot 23. My property will be directly impacted by this city building project, so I'm here tonight. I'd much rather be home tonight, sitting in my easy chair and minding my own business. But once again, a city building project will take away another little piece of my enjoyment of life that has persisted for over two decades now. I don't see an end in sight. City planning boards have achieved outstanding results throughout this city, but where I live, not so much. I've taken a lot of time to gather information and document my concerns about the Oak Haven project, but I thought tonight the information would not be relevant for the purpose of this amendment request. But now I'm here, I see a little different, and I'm not prepared for it. Many residents now living around the Oak Haven property did not live there in 2007, 11 years ago when it was approved, and they will not have the opportunity to express relevant concerns tonight either. The fact that this project was approved in 2007 and reasons why the Hastings family did not build it then, when they were active builders in this area, raises a red flag. And a question remains, if this amendment is intended to circumvent changes in city policy or whatever you call it, or perhaps state law regarding a sinkhole. In my opinion, this entire process seems to reek of impropriety. And it appears the only recourse that residents of Franklin Heights subdivision have left to obtain a no vote on this amendment is to rely on the integrity of you members on this board tonight. And that's about it. Unfortunately, I did not prepare. I didn't know this other stuff would come up, so I didn't prepare for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plummer. Anyone else?
My name is Dave Brown. I live at 415 Conhocken Court. My property is the one furthest to the north on the plat that backs up to the property in question. I have several concerns. One is what type of buffer, I didn't really hear that in the presentation, between properties that they bump into and the ones behind us. Another thing that was concerned that he had addressed was the drainage, because it floods down through here. And I know the water that runs down to Franklin Heights sometimes crosses the road. So you're going to have water going somewhere sometime. And so these are some concerns of mine. Another is traffic. You're talking about building 31 dwellings back there. And you're saying there could be as many as 4 cars to each dwelling. They're all coming out that one little drive down there, and they're going down our road, Conhocken, going down Swarthmore, going down Franklin Heights. And it took me 15 minutes to get out of Franklin Heights this evening to get on Old Fort. And you're going to increase traffic that much trying to get them out of there. That's just some of my concerns. I live there and have lived there for 15 years. I made my final payment on my house this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Congratulations.
Anyone else?
My name is Margaret Wood, and I live at 1248 Ballard Drive on the Evergreens farm side. My house backs right up to where the gazebo will be. My main concern as an insurance agent is the blasting. Throughout the development here in Murfreesboro, I see more and more with homeowner claims coming in, damage to the houses with blasting. Their insurance policy covers the damage and such, but family members are displaced because the house isn't fit to live in because of foundation issues. My house is on a slab, and I know my insurance will help cover it to a point, but what I see is developers are blaming the blasting company, who is licensed, bonded, permit, insured. They're blaming the developers because the developer hired them. So they fall under the developer's policy, but the developer's saying, no, the blasters are the ones that are responsible for it. They did the blasting. And meanwhile, the homeowner's policies are running out of limits. And so now this family winds up homeless. I will be within 300 feet of the blasting of that water main area where they're going to be laying all the sewage and having that main driveway coming into this development. So that's going to be my main concern because my house is on a slab. So my concern is, where's the risk management? Who's going to be accountable if something should happen to my home? What requirements are they going to ask of me for documentation of the condition of my home prior to the work being done, after the work being done, if I should have any damage? Who do I report it to? Should I come to the city? Do I go to the developer? Do I go to the blasting? Who's going to answer to my insurance company or to me? This is something that I see frequently as an insurance agent. I've always been the advocate for my insured that goes through this. Now I'm going to be the insured having to go through it, and it scares the daylights out of me because I see it so often. I'm also one of the ones that asks for a small piece of fence to kind of block behind the gazebo so that there's no through traffic. If that's going to be a picnic area, I didn't know there's going to be a fire pit. That's a bit of a concern for me because it is a wooded area and you're going to be keeping trees and things like that. I'm not excited about it having a fire hazard of, people being there, having an open fire pit. You can't be guaranteed responsible people. I don't know how that's going to be managed. Again, this was the first time I heard about that a fire pit's going to be 10 feet off my backyard or 12 feet. The last thing is right along on the north side of my property between mine and my neighbors is a storm drain that currently drains right now into the woods, into that sinkhole. Now that that property is going to be developed, that water won't be able to drain properly into that. My concern there too is this going to cause that to back more into my property, into a foundation that may possibly get damaged from blasting. So these are just some of the concerns that I have with the development. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Cortland Coleman. I am the applicant with my co-applicant Jay Barger over here. About the fire pit, first and foremost, I'm not sure in a townhome community the insurance policy is going to allow that. So like her, that might be something that should be nixed from the common area over there. But one of our main reasons for the bringing this back through for the rezoning of this is we just felt like in today's market, 11 years later, a starter home style townhome community with smaller square footages and lower price points wasn't the right product for this community. As a longtime realtor in this county, in this area, we just determined that we thought that a bigger, nicer, more expensive product would be more in line with a lot of the houses around, especially Plantation South and some of the homes in the county. So one of the main reasons for asking for the 5 additional lots would be, to make it a little bit more profitable and allow us to put more amenities, more landscaping, more hardy board and concrete and products into this area to really, I see it as being probably the most expensive real estate being sold in the area when we complete it. In regards to her question, I've actually walked the property many times. walk the perimeter to try to see if a fence was possibility, but I really believe that the large trees there are a better buffer than trying to take them down and put in a fence. Plus, there's some neighbors have their fences right on the property, so we don't want to have that no man's land with, right between two fences put up. So that's why we're wanting to do the Class C buffer, the 12-foot buffer, leave as many of the trees as possible, and provide privacy for the people that will buy these and the people that live around the area. In regards to the draining into the sinkhole, I do not believe, and I'm not an expert there, but the drainage directly to the south of the property, I've been monitoring during heavy rains, and it virtually has no water in it whatsoever, and that would back up to the houses in Plantation South. And I believe the drain between your property actually goes into the ditch and actually heads north. So I haven't seen any of the other properties actually draining water on this property. I see it draining itself, but I'm not an expert in regards to that, and that's why we have these fabulous engineers here. But with us being the owners, the developers, the builders, and the realtors, our goal is to put a top-notch property out here. This is going to be my first signature development. I want to be able to drive through there with the windows down and be extremely proud of the product that we put on the ground. We currently build custom homes, building custom homes in our own neighborhood right now, and we're really proud of what we've done, and I'm sure the finished product here will make the neighbors proud as well. We put a lot of time and effort into it. We thought just not about the bottom dollar, because honestly, starter homes in this town right here are the place to be, and that would be the easiest thing for us to do, is grab these 26 lots, build 1,400 square foot units. I know the previous plan had a 2,400 square foot unit, but the layout of the land doesn't allow for very many of those. So I do believe the actual square footage average would be down more like 1,200 square foot. So therefore, I think this is monetarily a better plan. It is an approved plan, so we are anticipating to be able to move forward with one of them. And I personally, think that the neighbors long-term will be more happy with the larger homes, the nicer homes, tall brick homes, and the quality that we bring to this project. Jay and I are local. My wife will be part of this team. She has many years in the real estate business, developing, helping builders, and we're really excited about it, and we're committed to bringing a good product to Murfreesboro and continue to take our name forward. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, let's close our public hearing. Matthew, we talked about drainage, stormwater, traffic, and blasting.
Sure. And for quite a bit of that, I'm going to rely on Mr. Huddleston, who is here, and I think I'll address some of the things that I can. Mr. Brown asked about the buffer that's proposed. Around the entire perimeter of the property, a Type C buffer is proposed. And in our zoning ordinance, we have 5 classes of buffers. Type A, which is 10 feet, Type B, which is 10 feet, Type C, which is 12 feet wide, Type D, which is 15 feet wide, and Type E, which is 20 feet wide. So they're proposing a Type C buffer. And the Type C buffer, in that Type C buffer, they're looking to preserve as many of the existing trees along the perimeter as possible. And they're also, so with that being said, that doesn't mean that the trees that are there form a Type C buffer. They'll have to submit a landscape plan that supplements those existing trees with sufficient vegetation to qualify as a Type C buffer. And so our Urban Environmental Department will look at that design to make sure that whatever is on that ultimate landscape plan will qualify as a Type C buffer. With respect to the fire pit, certainly understand Ms. Wood's concern. I think what we were going for there and working with the developer to improve the amenity area to kind of make it a more formal gathering area, fire pit would be kind of a central area where people could gather. But I would be fine eliminating the fire pit and having kind of maybe a more formal or like a formal area to gather without a fire pit, such as they could incorporate arbors or trellises or
Possibly a grill for the...
Oh, but grills, yes. So, I think that there are things that can be done without a fire pit, if that's a concern. As far as drainage and traffic and the sinkhole, I think Mr. McGill addressed the blasting. Mr. Huddleston may have some additional comments about that, but as far as drainage, Mr. Huddleston has been in conversation with Mr. Caldwell and Mr. McGill, and Mr. Huddleston and Mr. Balachandra can both address the traffic issues.
Evening, Vice Chairman Wade, members of the Planning Commission, Sam Huddleston, City Engineering Department. I recall this project when it came through the first time. We had some of the same complaints, same concerns as before. The plan that we have reviewed with the applicant, I think, addresses the primary reliance on the sinkhole, and then the secondary overflow. That seemed to be a very workable relationship, a very workable plan that would direct any additional runoff away from the neighboring properties. We did review the existing drainage patterns, and a few of the lots around there drain to that area, their backyards primarily. But there's pretty extensive drainage system in the remainder of the developments there. So really, this site is almost fully self-contained from a drainage standpoint. It doesn't discharge water onto anyone else, and it takes very little water from the neighboring properties. And so I think the drainage plan that they submitted and the concept that Mr. McGill described this afternoon or this evening would meet our expectations. Franklin Heights is a tough area for us traffic-wise, and we know that. We're a little bit hamstrung because that's an existing county subdivision. Being able to expend city dollars on traffic improvements there. What we have worked on in the past in the city developments there is to make sure there's some alternative routes. And if you'll examine the street pattern around Franklin Heights, around Plantation South, around St. Andrews Drive, and some of the other neighborhoods, you'll see that there's connectivity to the east and to the south. If you'll look at the master plans we're working on some of the other developments in this area, you'll see that we're adding a bridge over Puckett Creek to allow some additional east-west traffic. You'll also see there's some connectivity again to the east and west. We think there is a long-term there is a benefit perhaps on 96 for a signalized intersection. Franklin Heights is not the right place for that signalized intersection based on the signals that are already in place and the proposed signal locations that staff has reviewed with the development plans in the area. But we do think a signalized intersection that would give some relief to Franklin Heights would be beneficial there. And Mr. Balachandra and me, we're constantly looking for opportunities to see those signalized intersections installed and improved that would provide some relief in that area. And we're hopeful that we can work a project in the very near future that would provide some signalized relief to that neighborhood. Be glad to answer any questions.
Sam, you want to talk about the blasting issue?
Well, the blasting is a reality in Murfreesboro. We joke from time to time, but the reality is we have one rock, and we hit it every time we dig. And so, for installation utilities and for development in Murfreesboro, blasting is reality on almost every site. And Wes did review all of that with you, and you're certainly aware of the state permitting and state oversight that's provided there. In fact, the city, we're not able to regulate blasting. That is regulated at the state level. It is a necessary part of the development process in our community. We do work with the developer and the contractor. Our city fire marshal works closely with them as these projects get ready to go to construction. And we do have a pre-construction meeting with the contractor to review some of our emergency response procedures, identifying points of contact, and bring up construction-related issues, including discussion of blasting in that pre-construction meeting. And there are mechanisms that are available to the public if they believe they have been damaged, and we understand they may be difficult, but those are the remedies that we know are available to someone who thinks they may have suffered damage from blasting. And quite honestly, we know that from time to time there are impacts from blasting that the contractor and the developer are then responsible for to try to make that property owner whole.
This may be out of turn, but I'll make mention that years ago when a development was going behind our house, the blasting contractor requested that they, and I'm making this term up, this is my term, seismographic measurement device that they literally chain to our porch, and so that they had it there so that they were making the determination that the vibration of the blasting, and they could guide it. I don't know if that's still a requirement, and if it is, maybe we can, the developer can coordinate with their contractor and have that same device placed on this lady's near or on her house.
Yeah, there are a couple of preliminary steps that we see a lot of times. One of them is a pre-blast survey for properties that are in close proximity to the proposed blasting. That can document existing conditions. And then there's also the seismic monitoring that you're referencing that can measure the actual energy levels that are transmitted onto the adjacent properties. And there's some guidelines and levels that are established, and there's requirements for contractors to keep their blast levels and their energy really that's going into those adjacent properties to a minimum, and seismic monitoring is how they document that.
Any more questions for Mr. Huddleston?
And Mr. Huddleston, do you want to reference or make some comment regarding Mr. Plummer's concern about sinkhole state law changes or things that we'd be doing to try to, are we changing the normal way we deal with sinkholes in this case?
Well, and Ms. Jones, you and I have seen enough projects develop in Murfreesboro over the years that if sinkholes are also a reality in Murfreesboro, and so if we said that we weren't developing in sinkhole basins, be very little development here. So the reality is then we deal with the conditions we have. We look at it from an engineering standpoint, really on quality and quantity on regulations that the city control. And we always want to make sure for that sinkhole system, because it is a less documented system than a typical engineered or constructed system we see. But that's one of the reasons we met with the applicant and their engineer to discuss the possibility that we have an extreme event that's more than the sinkhole can handle. What happens? Well, we want to keep things dry. We want to reduce the impact on neighbors. We want to keep homes and heating and air units from getting wet, and so they've demonstrated to me that they have that good control of that. But the other part of that, Ms. Jones, is that there's a state requirement for review of those proposed modifications, and we do rely on the state to do their part of the review and permitting on that, since it is a state program. But we've worked very comfortably, I guess I would say, with developers and engineers and the state staff that receive and review those applications.
Thank you for addressing that. Appreciate it.
One last question regarding her question on procedures and processes for when you're doing the blasting. Who is she supposed to call if it does affect her? I know she had a question on that.
Yes, and so what we direct callers, and we do receive, I would say we receive a complaint or two per week in our office. Can't speak for the fire department on the numbers, but I'm confident they receive perhaps a complaint or two per week. And so what that does for us and for the city fire marshal is it triggers at least a visit and inspection to the site. by a construction inspector of our department or an inspector from the fire department. But then what we also advise those callers to do is to make contact with the developer and with the contractor, and if they believe they have damage, to file an insurance claim with one of those responsible parties. Since that is a private party action, it's hard for the city to get in the middle of all of that, but we're very free to give them the names and contact numbers for the companies that have obtained the permits, for the key people at those organizations, to try to help them find the right person to talk to at that organization. And we do realize sometimes, that insurance claim process can be difficult and it can be time consuming, but it is a remedy available to the homeowners if they do believe they've incurred some type of blasting damage.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. I'll be glad to answer any questions, if anything else.
Thank you. Staff have anything else?
I've got a question, and quite honestly, I don't know who it's for. I'll direct it at staff and let y'all take a stab at it. I'm looking at the project, and in the lower southeast corner where we have the grill and stuff down there, the fire pit and the gazebo or whatever it is that we're suggesting go there. I struggle with what should that be, and I'm not sure that I would want a fire pit on the other side of the fence behind my house. I'm pretty sure that I don't want that. I'm pretty sure that I don't want that to be their neighborhood's gathering space. I like the place kind of as a bark park, but I'm not sure it's fair to those neighbors to have dogs barking in their backyard. And I'm just not sure that's the appropriate gathering spot for this entire project. It looks to me like between units 10 and 11, there's a green space that would be perfect for a fire pit and a gazebo that would accomplish the same exact purpose. It would be much more centralized in this development, and it would basically give her a green space in her backyard, which would be a much better buffer for her than anything that I think has been proposed.
Mr. Smotherman, the area between units 10 and 11 is the location of the sinkhole that's been referenced. But so while that I agree that does that would be a much more ideal location, more centrally located. I don't believe that would be a feasible option for the amenity area.
Okay, so it's not really green space as it appears on page 23. It's really just straight off into a sinkhole.
Yeah, that would be the sinkhole, and I think they would use some of that for detention as well.
Well, the detention area is actually showing really to the north and the west, I guess, of that. I'm trying to figure out, I see a dark spot on here. I'm assuming that might be the sinkhole, but I'm curious as to whether or not there's enough.
That is. Yeah, unfortunately, that's a very critical part of the drainage system that we're talking about tonight, to make sure that we control that and do that. I mean, one thing we could do with this, if it's, we could move that gazebo a little bit closer to the unit itself and put it a little bit further away from the building. That's very much a possibility, and make that maybe a little bit more of a turf area and stuff like that, just to maybe get the people a little bit further away as far as the activity goes, away from that property line. So that's a design change that could be easily implemented as part of what we're doing right now.
I'll point out something as well. On the building just to the north of where the gazebo is, there's a 59-foot setback to the property line itself. So, you put the gazebo maybe middle of that building, you're really looking at over 60 foot to the property line. And then like her house behind there, you're looking at over, probably closer to 100 foot to her home. And, that is RS10, but they are on 50-foot lots. She'll have more people closer to her in her backyards and her own neighborhood than I think where this area would be. Previously, it was actually designed to be a community garden, but our fear was, and I could put that in, but the fear with the community garden would be it's just going to be a weed pile. You know, it's going to attract bugs, mosquitoes, et cetera, if it's not maintained. So that was our thought, to change it to gazebo. I mean, we could keep it to a community garden area, but long term, I just don't know the feasibility of that. So,
Mr. Smotherman, I do think that they can rearrange that area. If you're okay with that area being their amenity area, I think they could rearrange it so that the more active areas would be closer to Unit 31, including the structure and any type of uncovered seating area, to get additional space in between those gathering areas and the adjacent properties.
And that also, too, would help in preserving some of the existing trees in that area that would create even a better buffer, you know, between them and the activity that's going there. So I think that's probably a
I think that would
solution.
help tremendously, because, I mean, it is a heavily wooded area there. If you move it closer to the buildings and get it further away from her backyard, and there's no way it's 100 feet from I'm sitting here looking at it on Google Maps, and it's, you know, from the backyard of her property line, what it looks like on Google Maps is, you know, it's maybe 40 feet at the most over to where the property line is in the back corner of her house there. So I don't.
And we can provide some separation.
Yeah, distance is the best buffer you
Distance
can
is the
have,
best
there's no
buffer.
doubt.
Yep, I learned that a long time ago from someone. He knows who.
I know who.
And I mean, you know, over the garden's a seasonal thing. I don't really like gardens because it's, you know, 3 months out of the year, maybe 4 months out of the year usage for the property, and then it's just kind of, you know, I don't know that I didn't like the garden better than the fire pit idea, though, just for her sake.
Mm-hmm.
But from a community usage standpoint, if you'll move the usage further from her house, much appreciated. I'll put it that way.
We can do that. That's something we can certainly accomplish.
And Mr. Caldwell, while you're up there, the dumpster area, the enclosed dumpster area, and the mail kiosk, I don't see in your, you know, your pictures or your what those are going to be like. That would be something I would just want to make sure that the staff, you know, approves, since we're not seeing what you're.
Well, as you know, I think in the
Plan.
design guidelines, there's very specific criteria for the dumpster pads themselves relative to enclosing them and gates and all that, so that'd be easy to do. And certainly, I think the mail kiosks, the attempt will be to mimic, you know, some of the architectural elements in that. So again, we've got to come back before you for final site plans, so we can certainly go through that process at that time.
I think they probably could insert some images into their
we
pattern
can.
book as
As
examples.
we go through
of what-
city council, yeah, we can add some images there.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Cardwell.
Thank you.
May I have the opportunity to
Excuse me, sir.
speak again also?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Work back, listen here.
What's the wishes of the staff, of the commission?
I mean, as the developer mentioned, he by right, this thing was already approved in 2007, and he could go with the original 26-unit plan. However, I think this plan is a better plan laid out, especially from a price point perspective that would impact the values of the homes around it. So I'm gonna vote for this plan.
Is that a motion?
It's a motion.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Annexation plan of service annexation petition for approximately 18.34 acres located along Armstrong Valley Road, Cornerstone Development LLC applicant.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Wade. Our third public hearing tonight is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition. Once again, I'm going to correct an acreage. There's a typo on the agenda. It should be 18.75 acres. We actually added some right-of-way, and you'll notice that the map before you is a little bit different from what is in your agenda materials. This map includes some additional right-of-way and we did advertise the annexation of the right-of-way in front of not only the subject property, but 2 additional properties as well. So just the correct map is on the screen showing the proposed annexation area. The annexation includes one 18.29 acre parcel that is located along the east side of Armstrong Valley Road. Mr. Harry Mingy with Cornerstone Development has requested the annexation of the property. It is directly adjacent to the existing city limits on its north, south, and east sides, and it's within the city's urban growth boundary, and the owner has petitioned the city for its annexation. There's a companion zoning request that will be the next item on the agenda. There's an existing single-family home and several outbuildings on the subject property. The annexation plan of services that was submitted with your agenda packet identifies several issues in providing services to those existing homes. Those issues were brought to our attention by the Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department. The existing driveway is insufficient for a fire truck to access those homes to provide medical first responder service as well as fire protection. In addition, there is not an area for a fire truck to turn around, and so the Fire and Rescue Department has indicated that they would recommend that all structures be demolished prior to the effective date of annexation, or the following steps be taken. To install a fire hydrant within 500 feet of the structures, expand the driveway from 10 to 20 feet in width, and provide evidence from a licensed engineer that it can withstand the weight of a fire truck. Install a turnaround at or near the structures. Remove 2 trees near the structures for fire truck access. And lastly, to demolish the existing accessory structure that is located in the wooded area east of the house. With all that being said, we did contact Mr. Matt Taylor with SEC, who represents Mr. Mingy, and Mr. Taylor has indicated that they do intend to tear down all of the structures before the effective date of annexation. So if the Planning Commission recommends approval, we would be doing so with the understanding that before second reading on the zoning, that we would hold second reading until all of the structures were demolished or these conditions were met. Most likely what would happen is the structures would be demolished. I believe that the previous owner of the parcel that's been requested for annexation is still living in that house for a short time, and when he vacates, I believe Mr. Mingy will demolish the structures. With that being said, another point of clarification regarding sewer. Sewer is not directly available to the subject property, but it's just a short ways to the north and can be extended by the developer to serve any future development on the property. The plan of services has been included in your agenda packet detailing how services will be provided from other city departments. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing on this matter and then forward a recommendation to the City Council. Mr. Matt Taylor and Mr. Harry Mingy are both present if you have any questions for them regarding this annexation.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor? Anything for staff?
I mean, I know we're not looking at a site plan, but tell me a little bit about how this property is going to be. Is it going to be accessed from Armstrong Valley Road, and is this a right-of-way that these people have to access it, or?
It's a flag lot right now, and I think the zoning will actually clarify a few things. We're looking at the zoning request actually takes into consideration this property as well as the adjacent parcels to the south. So I'll show you a conceptual site plan or a conceptual subdivision layout that I think will answer your question, Mr. Halliburton. So taking all 3 of those parcels, 2 of which are already in the city limits, this is how the applicant intends to develop the property with a single-family subdivision.
So you're saying the 2 white lots are inside the city?
Well, there are 3 parcels total, one of which is in the county. It's the northernmost parcel, and it makes up if you'll follow my cursor, just about a 50-foot strip of this area going out to Armstrong Valley Road. And then there are 2 parcels to the south. So if we go back to here's the zoning map, you'll see.
Oh, I see.
Parcel in orange is what's up for annexation, and the the 2 parcels in purple
get it.
are already in the city limits.
Okay, all right.
Good, Mr. Halliburton?
Yeah, I'm good, sorry.
All right. All right, let's open up our public hearing now. Anyone want to speak, please come forward. All right, let's close our public hearing.
Move for approval.
Got a motion, there's a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Zoning application for approximately 18.29 acres located along Armstrong Valley Road to be zoned RS6 simultaneous with annexation, approximately 44.5 acres to be rezoned from RS8 to RS6 Cornerstone Development LLC applicant. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Wade. These are the 3 parcels that I referenced earlier. The area in orange proposed to be zoned RS6 simultaneous with annexation, and the 2 parcels in purple proposed to be rezoned from RS8 to RS6. In designing a proposed subdivision for this property, Mr. Taylor and his design team have identified some wetlands on the property that are under the RS8 zone, would eliminate some of the lot yield that they were hoping to get on the property. So what they're requesting to do is to rezone all 3 parcels to RS6, single-family residential with a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet to help mitigate the impact of the wetlands on the property. And I'll bring back up the proposed subdivision layout. And one thing that I will mention is that this subdivision layout is conceptual in nature. It's a good faith effort by Mr. Taylor and his client to show you how they intend to develop the property. This is not a planned development, though, so both the subdivision layout and the proposed sample homes that they've submitted are nothing that we can hold them to. But it's a good faith effort by them to show you how they intend to develop the property.
Can I ask right there,
Sure.
Mr. Blomley, back on the picture, so these pictures we're looking at, what lot size would you say those houses are sitting on? 15,000 square feet?
Mr. Taylor, do you know where these pictures were taken?
Those pictures came from the Sheffield Park neighborhood to the north, and those range in size from, I think the smallest is around 7,000 square feet and goes up to 10 or 12. So all of these here will fit on ours. They represent a front entry garage,
Okay.
and which is what we would have.
You could take the same plan and put it down on these smaller
ma'am.
lots, and they'll fit.
Mr. Blomley, if my memory serves me correctly, even though
Thank you, Mr.
this is not guaranteed what they would look like, but under RS6, it doesn't now have to be mostly or all masonry product?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You beat me to the punch on something. Under the existing RS8 zone for 2 of those parcels, the RS8 zone allows for larger or requires a larger minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet, but it doesn't offer some of the assurances that the RS6 zone offers. The RS6 zone requires a minimum 75% brick, stone, or hardy board on each facade, whereas there's no such material requirement in the RS8 zone. In addition, the RS6 zone has a minimum front setback of 35 feet, whereas the RS8 zone has a minimum front setback of 30 feet, making it easier to achieve a driveway that will accommodate 4 vehicles as required by the zoning ordinance. So those are some assurances that you get with the RS6 zone that you don't get with the RS8 zone. A little bit of history on the property. The 2 purple parcels were actually rezoned from RS15 to RS8 in 2016, and as I mentioned, now they're requested to be rezoned to RS6. The surrounding areas, there are several city subdivisions located in the area. Mr. Taylor referenced Sheffield Park to the north, which has minimum 8, 10, and 12,000 square foot lots. To To the west, or excuse me, to the east is the West Wind subdivision, which is zoned RS8 for a minimum 8,000 square foot lots. Further to the west and to the east and south is the Magnolia Grove subdivision, which has minimum 6, 8, and 10,000 square foot lots. So there are a variety of lot sizes in the area. Now going to the 2035 future land use map, recommends auto urban general residential, and there's the excerpt from the future land use map on the screen. This character classification recommends single-family detached or attached residential uses at a density of 3.54 to 8.64 dwelling units per acre. And the RS6 zone is generally consistent with the auto urban general residential land use character. Under ideal circumstances, the RS6 zone might yield up to 5 to 6 dwelling units per acre, which is within the recommended density. However, because of the wetlands, the proposed density shown on the concept plan is actually right around 3 dwelling units per acre, which is actually a little bit less than the recommended density of the future land use map. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing tonight and then discuss the matter and then formulate a recommendation for the council. And Mr. Taylor is here if you have any questions for him, and of course I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Matthew. Let's open up our public hearing now. Anyone want to speak, please come forward. No one? Public hearing now closed. Questions from staff or commission? If not,
Move for approval.
got a motion, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Annexation plan of service petition for approximately 0.96 acres located along Indian Park Drive, Glenn Hutchison applicant. Mr. Brumley.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Wade. Subject property is actually located at the northern terminus of Indian Park Drive. Indian Park Drive being a street that runs westward from South Church Street, serving quite a number of single-family neighborhoods and multifamily neighborhoods. This annexation request is in conjunction with the Glenview Farms Section 4 subdivision. The preliminary plat and the construction plans identified the area that's in orange on the map before you as the area that would be used for stormwater management for Section 4. This area is actually outside the city limits. Mr. Hutchinson, the developer of Glenview Farm Section 4, has requested the annexation of this property so that the entire Section 4, including this stormwater management area, is located within the city limits. And this area is just a little bit under an acre, and the purpose of this, as I mentioned, is just to get the entire Section 4 inside the city limits into one jurisdiction. Once this happens, he'll be moving forward with construction on Section 4. Section 4 being the area, if you see Broken Arrow Drive, that is the area that he'll be moving forward with. We have a plan of services that's been included in the agenda materials. This will be a relatively easy annexation to effect. There's no companion zoning request. It will be given an interim RS15 zoning classification. The plan of services outlines how services could be provided, but in actuality, it's just going to be a detention pond, so there really is no need for services, really other than SAM's crews, inspectors, in their service when they go out and look at the infrastructure. So I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing, and I don't know if Mr. Hutchinson's here. Mr. Roundtree is here representing Mr. Hutchinson if you have any questions for him.
Thank you, Matthew. Mr. Roundtree, you have anything? Thank you. All right, let's open up our public hearing. Anyone want to speak, please come forward. All right, thank you. Public hearing is now closed.
Make
Commission?
a motion for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Zoning application for approximately 4.73 acres located at 2615 South Rutherford Boulevard to amend to Rutherford Boulevard Self-Storage PCD Echo Site applicant. Mr. Darnell.
Good evening, sir, and good evening, commission members. This property is located along the west side of South Rutherford Boulevard and south of Haven Drive. The property is currently zoned PCD, and there's a self-service storage facility that currently occupies that property. It's about 95,000 square feet of floor area. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the PCD to allow a telecommunication tower on the property. The tower would be located near the center of the site and would occupy about 1,235 square feet of the site. Tower would have a height of 160 feet and would be enclosed by a wood fence of 8 feet in height. Landscaping would be installed along the perimeter of the fence to screen it from the public right-of-way. Adjacent zoning includes RM12 on the north, CH on the east, PRD on the south, and RS8 and RS10 on the west. There are residential subdivisions on the south and west of this site, and property to the east will eventually be developed as commercial. We've actually already seen some site plans approved for portions of that property. Patton Hahn with Baker Donaldson is here representing the applicant, and he can talk more about this request and also show you some propagation maps for the tower. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing and then make a recommendation to the City Council. Staff can answer any questions, and I'm going to pass around the propagation maps that he provided us earlier this week.
Thank you. My name is Patton Hahn. I'm with the law firm Baker Donaldson. I'm representing EcoSite. Also with me tonight is Glenn Pennington from EcoSite and Guillermo Perez and Ken Blackburn from T-Mobile. T-Mobile is would be the first tenant on this tower. The tower would have, I think it's in the application, and then I'll have a word for the packet we give you.
We call it the packet.
Yeah. The packet would have a room for 3 other antennas on the site. The main need for this antenna is with the kind of explosion of cellular devices we have here in our society. All of the existing sites are basically already overloaded. And do you want to bring up the propagation? This says Oak Haven. Apologies.
Reference the height of this thing.
Look at that updating
right now. Roses. Behind the roses.
You got it.
Yeah. So what I'm going to show you, and Mr. Perez can talk about it, he's an actual radio frequency engineer who helps T-Mobile analyze where they need additional sites. And Guillermo, do you want to come up and talk about these 2 maps? These are the ones you wanted, right?
Yeah, if you want to show them. Hi, my name is Bill Perez. I'm a senior RF engineer with T-Mobile. Okay, so this site is basically a capacity site. Quantity of users is just, the area is growing, so we, with everything coming, 5G, Internet of Things, the IoT that you've seen coming, everything is, this site is very strategically placed, and we wouldn't be the only carriers. The other 2 carriers could get on there, so it's a strategic site for all carriers. So if you look at it coverage-wise, this is the area without it and with it, right? So the green is probably the strongest. We'll call it indoors coverage, inside the houses, apartments, indoors. So you can see we have the yellow is a little weaker indoors. Some people indoors may not have the service they want completely all the time. So you can see the difference from there to there. It fills in all that neighborhood to the left and all the neighborhood that's going to come to the right, and plus capacity offload to the site to the north of it, site to the south of it. Any questions? Any? Did you put the towers?
They're all confused.
Yes, the other stuff, the FCC towers and
The original.
no, okay, that's fine. Yeah, and I was going to say that we have looked at all the FCC towers and everything that's in the area. There's not anything else, no other structure that we can go on. This is a very strategic site, and it's in a good spot. It's in a real good spot.
Thank you.
And as Mr. President talked about, we did look at other areas. Let's see if I can get it. We did look at several other areas around in this area, understanding that there's a lot of residential people, residential neighborhoods, and certainly didn't want. We wanted to put it in a place where it had a minimum impact on residential neighborhoods. This site was the only place where we could build it, and we had a willing landlord, basically. It is in a commercial establishment, the self-storage site, and it's on the edge of other commercial development. As part of the landscaping, we proposed planting 4 Leland cypress trees that will grow to be about 60 to 70 feet tall when they're fully developed. Also, it's not in the materials yet, but we do have a fall zone letter from an engineer indicating that if the tower collapsed, it would collapse within a 20-feet area within basically the enclosure it'll be in.
Thank you.
So I've got kind of 2 questions, and this just goes from, I'm not an engineer, but we've seen different products that have arisen that have come to Murfreesboro when it comes to these cell towers. One latest that we've seen is where they're literally putting the communication piece on light poles in we'll call it in a shopping center area. So is the reason for something of this height just because those don't work as well, or because those things are so less obtrusive?
Yeah, those are called small cells.
Yeah.
RRH is remote heads, little remote head. They're very low power. They cover maybe 300 feet.
Okay.
Usually we use them in events or lower areas, downtowns, where we can go a block, and put them. It's very hard here so you need right away here, you would need fiber going underneath, everything to be able to transport it back. So a tower is a lot more feasible in that area, right? It's a little tougher.
And then the other, okay, I get that, and I figured that was the answer. But the other question is we've also seen these monopoles where they don't have, I'll call the leaves, the brackets that stand out some 10 feet or 5 to 10 feet from the pole itself. They're literally enclosed in the pole. We've got one actually on. That we approved, I know, as part of the BZA, that's kind of behind Hobby Lobby. It doesn't have so talk to us, why do we see both? And because those are definitely less obtrusive than having all these things on outside.
Those are definitely less obtrusive, but they're unipoles. They're called unipoles or flag poles. You always see they put a flag on it.
Correct.
And the problem is that they handcuff you what you can put inside of them. All the new technology, like the antenna that we really want to use, a lot of them don't fit in it. So a lot of carriers will compromise and say, well, we have nothing here, in a little bit older days. So if they want to go to the flagpole, that's the only thing that they can get at the moment. They may compromise their capacity, everything, because all the solutions are ground. Now all of our solutions are up, including the radio, remote heads, everything. So, engineering-wise, it's golden, right? We don't need the losses. There's no losses when you put everything on top. There's, you know, it's all very good. But that's the main reason for the unipole. It definitely handcuffs us. So like if we want to go to 5G and we want to put massive MIMO antennas up there, you know, to do, when we're going to get to the 1 gigabit, you want everybody at home, eventually in the future, we plan for people to have broadband at home through wireless, which is one of the big things that's coming. So it's those unipoles, they limit us, right? Because we have to do coax lines from the bottom, so we got to fill it up with 20 coax lines and losses and all that. And you got to put amplifiers on the top to make up for the uplink, and so yeah, they're very. We're almost trying to get away from them completely. The ones that we have now, you know, we're trying to just build next to them or find another structure because they tie up our hands. So yeah, but I agree, they are, aesthetically they look a little better, but they're not, I mean, most carriers would agree, you know, they want to be able to have the flexibility to put the best equipment up there. Yeah.
So the coverage with this flagpole thing isn't what you're going to get with...
It's not as good because you usually don't make them high, right? They're usually 100 feet or less.
So you need more of them.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, not only would you need more of them, but again, you can't put the equipment in there you want, because some of these big antennas that have massive MIMO wouldn't fit. You would have to make a canister like 100-inch wide, you know, to put a canister on top of it. Yeah. So yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem.
So I have two questions. One, what's the radius for your type of antenna?
You mean the coverage?
Yeah, the coverage radius.
Well, yeah, that all depends on how much you want to cover, because we can control that with electrical tilts and down tilts, right? So we have vertical planes and electrical planes coming to the antenna so we can move it around. But in general, depends again on the frequency, low band versus, but I'd say mid band, which is our high capacity, you're looking at about 3 to 5 miles, real good coverage, you know?
Okay.
Sometimes it depends on the morphology, you know, and if you got trees, mountains, hills, you know, it's all very dynamic.
All right. So my second question is there's currently a cell tower behind Roses, and when we're looking at the height of the cell tower, I mean, the 160-foot cell tower, is this much higher than the one behind Roses today? Or do you know?
Yeah, the ones that I think we've seen come through BZA in the past have been in the like 150 to 160 range. That seems to be a very typical number. I'm not sure about that one specifically, but that seems to be the sort of typical height that we see.
Because I know, I mean, if we're looking at, I mean, I know there's commercial developing on one side, but directly behind us is all residential. So this will be impeding, I mean, from a residential standpoint, I mean, they're going to be seeing a big structure all across that neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best solution for us. There's no doubt, you know, and even for the customers, you know, and everything. It definitely is. The other carriers can get on too, you know. So it's going to be a strategic tower for everybody for future, you know, no doubt.
From my house in the wintertime, I think I can see 2 towers, and I can see one over by Mitchell Nelson, and I can see one at the corner of Northfield and Memorial. And you can see them through the trees because they've got lights flashing on the top of them. But I think I complain much more about whether or not I'm getting good signal service than I do about whether or not I can see a blinking light through the trees in the wintertime.
This tower will not be lighted.
Yeah, it doesn't have light.
Doesn't have a light.
It has to be about $199 to get a portion to put a light by FCC standards.
Okay.
FAA and FCC. Yeah.
And a point to follow up on something Commissioner Halliburton said is when I've done a couple of these similar things in residential, in small sites, and the issue you run into there is they're not quite as, they're bigger than a telephone pole, and they stick out and if you put them in a true residential setting, they're going to look very different, and we've had a lot of complaints in those towns and cities that have done that about the way they appear in residential settings. They're much easier to put in, say, your downtown or commercial district.
Yeah, the transport side is the problem, right? Downtown, they have a lot of dark fiber underneath. So, they already plan for the future. There's a lot of fiber underneath downtown. We are going to do that in downtown. All over the place. Verizon has it now. We're there.
I guess we can ask.
Straight down Broadway, going down the back. But the transport, like this area, we would have to break the whole ground and put fiber from there all the way. You know what I mean? It's like, and then that would take 2 years at least, 2 or 3 years. So that makes it even, it's not that practical for those type of neighborhoods.
Can I briefly just address Mr. Halliburton? The tower, I'm on sheet C11 in the packet that they gave us, shows one platform. That's the word I'm going to use, platform, affixed to the tower, and then it shows 2 potential future platforms. If it would make the commission more comfortable, what we could do is have them put something in saying, beyond that one platform, they need to come back when they add additional, if they want to add additional platforms and go through a review process. That's something I was thinking of a few minutes ago. I think with BZA, with the towers that go through the BZA process, if you're changing out an antenna or adding an antenna onto a platform that's already been approved, those typically go through. But I think if you were coming to add a whole nother level of platform, I think we would bring that back to BZA. So it would probably be reasonable to do the same with this one. This one doesn't have to go through BZA because it's in a planned development. So it may be reasonable to expect to see that again.
We did see this in BZA. No?
You should not have.
Okay. Maybe. Did y'all come before BZA?
Not for this site.
Okay.
For a different site.
Maybe.
It's another tower.
Yeah.
You got all
sorry.
your towers mixed up.
You're right. I get Planning Commission BZA mixed up sometimes.
I understand.
Yeah, really, truly, I mean, for me, it's a question of service, and for the people who live in this particular area where they're struggling for service, and most of us have eliminated our landlines now, and we've all become reliable on our cell phones, and in an emergency situation, you want your cell phone to work. And, I think that I'm much more comfortable living with the towers in my neighborhood, knowing that my cell phone's going to work, than I am thinking that, I can always plant a tree in my yard where I can't see a cell tower if I want to.
To follow, I think 70 to 80%, I read that 70 to 80% of 911 calls are now made on cell phones.
And so I mean, I think that's the other side of the coin that we need to look at is the option of approving or not approving. If you don't approve it, then we're leaving the option open of leaving an area uncovered, and I think that's important that we make sure that we're providing that quality of life and service to our citizens. So
let's have our public hearing first.
There you go. I'm not going to make a motion yet.
Might need a bigger tower since Sprint and T-Mobile is talking about merging as well. So let's open up our public hearing. Anyone want to speak for or against, please come forward. No one? It's closed. Commission? Is there a motion?
I agree with you, Eddie. I think that just seeing these through BZA, there was what I thought were new engineering processes that from an aesthetic standpoint, if it could work as well, that was kind of my point. But it doesn't sound like that's the case. And
I think in areas like around MTSU where we have extremely high density, those antennas are phenomenal because they don't really go up that much, but they provide the service for an area, less than a mile around it. I think what we're trying to cover here is, even though it's residential and commercial in this area where we're talking about, the homes are a lot more spread out because it's more of a residential area. So in order to get the coverage we need, I think this is probably the correct solution, unless you want to just go put a pole up every so often, and we're talking about so many more antennas that and I get where you're coming from, because I mean, out in the Gateway area, we've got them on the side of buildings where you can't even tell that there's an antenna there. But I personally feel like in this particular neighborhood and area of town that, and again, I'm not saying I'm putting anything in their backyard that I don't already have in mind and I'm comfortable with. So again, I'll go back to, it's a question of appearance versus service. Ideally, yes, we would like to not have any antennas probably sticking up. I mean, I think houses look much more attractive now than they did in the 60s, because before we all got cable, we all had little antennas sticking up on our house, and they didn't look very attractive. So but I do think that in this particular situation, this is a good project. It's a project that would improve the quality of life and the security and safety of this area by giving them less potential of having a dead zone where they can't get their phone to work. And so,
motion, Mr. Smother.
And I'll move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So move. Carry. Thank you. Zoning application for approximately 3.64 acres located along Franklin Road and Veterans Parkway to be rezoned from CF to CH. Veterans Commons GP applicant. Mr. Donald.
Thank you, sir. The subject property is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Franklin Road and Veterans Parkway. This is near the new Kroger store that was built on Veterans Parkway a couple of years ago. The property is currently zoned CF. Earlier this year, the applicant brought us a site plan with a gas station on that corner. It turns out that there's a rule in our zoning ordinance that a gas station cannot be located on a CF zoned lot that is within 200 feet of a residentially zoned lot. And so there are county RM zoned parcels to the north and to the west of this site. The applicant has submitted a rezoning to CH, which doesn't have that same distance requirement for gas stations. The adjacent zoning is CH to the east, and again, county RM on the remaining sides. There are single-family residences to the north and the south of the site, and again, a large commercial development to the east. The Murfreesboro 2035 land use plan indicates that general commercial is appropriate for this property, and this request does appear to be consistent with the future land use map. I think Clyde Roundtree is here with Huddleston Steel representing the applicant. He can answer any questions, as can staff. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing and then make a recommendation to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roundtree, you have anything?
Vice Chairman Wade, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. I am available for any questions you may have. It's been an enduring process. Our client's been very faithful through the process to kind of stick with it. As Mr. Anthony mentioned, we went to commercial fringe originally because that was really kind of that was the direction of the area surrounding it, and we thought that would be the best bet. And then we came into this stipulation with the 200-foot separation. We tried to move through the BZA process to kind of, and our explanation was that the area surrounding this piece of property is most likely going to go towards a commercial highway type of application. So we've kind of been through the process on several different levels to make sure this moved through. So the CH zoning is appropriate. We feel like it's appropriate for location, but if you have any questions, I'll be available for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roundtree. Let's open up our public hearing now. Anyone who would speak for or against, please come forward. Public hearing is now closed. Mr. Wishes of the body. So staff is okay with this?
Yes. We'll see a specific project come later, and I'm sure we'll have comments and suggestions on a specific project. But I think as far as the rezoning request, it's a reasonable rezoning request in our opinion.
Okay.
Move for approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Zoning application for approximately 8.99 acres located along Old Fort Parkway to rezone from CH to PHRD, Village at Old Fort PRD, Investment Partners LLC applicant. Mr. Donald.
Thank you, sir. This property is located along the north side of Old Fort Parkway. It's a little bit west of Agri Park Drive. The property is currently zoned CH. This is a flag lot that has access to Old Fort Parkway via a shared driveway that runs between a Burger King and an auto parts store. I can't remember which one. Earlier this year, under new business, the commission heard a request for rezoning for this property to PRD to allow a multifamily residential development on this property. The applicant has revised that request and so is now requesting 143 single-family attached dwelling units or townhomes on the site. The density for this development would be 15.9 dwelling units per acre. All of the adjacent properties are zoned CH, and the adjacent land uses include a self-service storage facility on the west and mixed retail and restaurant use on the south. The properties on the north and east are not currently developed. Murfreesboro 2035 indicates that general commercial is the most appropriate land use for this property, and that would be consistent with the existing CH zoning. It is not consistent with the request before you tonight. So that is something that the applicant should address and discuss with you. As noted in the staff report, some of the issues that the commission may wish to consider are, again, that inconsistency with the land use plan. Parking on the site, there are no garages. This is all surface parking for these townhouses. And the lack of access to a signalized intersection. The earlier request that came to you a couple of months ago, the applicant was showing one of the lots connecting to Michaela Court being part of the future development. That lot has gone away with the revised request, so there is no access now back to Agri Park Drive and back to the signalized intersection. Rob Molchan with SEC is here representing the applicant. I think he has a presentation and he can talk more about the request. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing and then make a recommendation to the City Council, and staff can answer any questions that you may have.
Good evening, Vice Chairman Wade and the members of the Planning Commission. Rob Molchan, the SEC, here tonight on behalf of Investment Partners to present to you our request for rezoning from a from a commercial highway district to a planned residential district to create the village of Old Fort. As Donald did express, we were here back in January at a regular workshop session with an apartment complex. We were working diligently with staff, and we've come back with a revised application tonight to bring forth 143 townhome units. Some bearings in regards to the site, as Donald alluded to. The project is located in the northwest corner of Ag Park Drive and Highway 96, just north of the St. Andrews intersection as well. As you can see there, I'll just kind of zoom in a little bit. You can see Ag Park Drive is the reddish-orange road to the east of the site. Michaela Court is the dark blue line of the closed court next door, and Highway 96 is the blue line across the southern portion of the boundary of the property. As Donald talked about, the current zoning is commercial highway. We're looking at changing this to a planned residential district on that side. And another portion of this property is actually still staying within the CH zoning. It was just the stub street that's between the recently opened Burger King in the last 2 years and the AutoZone dealer, auto parts store next door. So that part is not part of the rezoning, but it's part of the overall project itself. As Donald talked about, the current land use plan calls for an auto urban general commercial character area. We're deviating from that with this proposal tonight to talk about it in regards to this being a transition to a residential type property. We feel it is an appropriate use of this property in regards to the fact of this will provide an opportunity for a residential component to this area. There are other residential pieces that are around this, but we feel this lot that's here is enclosed and encapsulated by commercial and office spaces, but we also feel it is a good opportunity to utilize for a residential component because of the walkability that the surrounding commercial developments allows for for the residents here that would move into this area and would be able to have a very walkable experience back to the commercial and business elements that are along 96 in regards to that properties along that area. So we feel it's an appropriate change to the land use plan on that side. Just give a little context to show you what the site looks like currently. This is a view looking north from the end of the existing shared driveway that's between Burger King AutoZone. Give you a little context of the property itself today. This is a view from the other side, along the storage facility lot over there on the western side, looking into the property. And again, very flat open space on that side. This is the view of the shared driveway. This is the portion of the property that's actually not being requested for rezoning, but this shows the access back to the site where we're going to be putting the potential townhome development on that side. Again, comes out as a 2-lane cross section back to a 3-lane dedicated right and left-hand turns out of the property, along with a 1-lane dedicated into the property. This is a view looking from that intersection there, looking back towards the west, towards Franklin. And this is a view back towards the interstate itself on Highway 96 from our entrance. Again, this is requesting a PRD for 143 townhomes. This is looking at about 15.9 units to the acre. These will be sold under a horizontal property regime. We're looking at these to be an affordable product. We're looking at a sub $200,000 price range for the sale of these units on that side. A very affordable unit, but also a very aesthetically pleasing unit to go along with that price point as we move forward with the project. All internal roadway structures or parking areas will be private and probably maintained by the HOA, and all your underground utilities throughout the development. The structures themselves, the 2-story townhomes, will be no taller than 35 feet in stature. As you can see, these are pictures of existing townhomes that we're utilizing for this site in regards to the architectural character and the overall design intent. The units themselves will range from just a little over 1,000 square feet up to 1,300 square feet of living space per unit. Each unit will have at least 2 bedrooms, but I think the actual floor plan only calls for 2 bedrooms per unit, but it will be at least meeting our usual ordinance standards of 2 bedrooms per unit. The buildings will have multiple offsets in the front and rear elevations to provide varying roof lines and pitch lines in the architecture to create character, so it's not just a flat seamless elevation on the front and backs of these. We'll also be providing windows on the ends of these units in regards to allowing a little more architectural character to the ends of these units, especially the units that are internally encapsulated in the project to have parking that are fully encompasses those townhomes on that side to give a little character. The windows themselves will be something we'll have to investigate as we go forward with the site plan, and if this does get approved in regards to the actual floor plans that they're looking at right now in regards to these units that you see before you tonight. There may be some opportunities and or challenges based on that floor plan to allow for those windows to be treated on those facades. And each of these units will also have a covered front porch or stoop. The buildings will all have eaves. The units will also have a rear patio area to go along with each of the units on that side. And you can see the rear elevations on this side and the side elevations and the smaller elevations on the sides representing some of the window facades along those side elevations. Materials, this will be a all cementatious type material. We'll be utilizing fiber cement board and fiber cement board shake siding on the front elevations. The sides and rear will be a fiber cement board siding altogether. And the trim and soffit areas will also be a fiber cement board product in order to make this a fully cementatious type product. Talk a little bit about the amenities itself. The project calls for roughly about 35% of the property, or 15% more than a requirement based on the design guidelines in regards to open space. So we're looking at about 3.1 acres of open space or usable open space in and around the property itself. We're also, based on the new design guidelines, required a requirement of a 5% formal open space, and I want to kind of go through some of those. We're meeting and exceeding those requirements in regards to the formal open space. First of all, one of the pieces, the parts you can see on the plan here on the screen, is a dog park with a pavilion area, possibly even a grilling station. We'll have 1 or 2 of these grilling stations spread throughout the development. This is more or less the main focal formal feature to the development itself on that side. Also looking at providing a mail kiosk, so directly as you come in the development, you will be able to stop at the mail kiosk to pick your mail up on your way in or on your way out, dropping off mail for the postal carrier to take with them. In the far northwest corner of the site, we've incorporated another one of these grilling stations. This is another one piece of our formal open space. This will be a seating/grilling station, so we'll have some some pavers and such like that to create a nice formal area with some picnic tables, but also grilling stations for the residents to have an opportunity to go outside and enjoy the weather and grill some burgers and such like that, and the outdoor stations on those sides. We're also incorporating as another piece of our formal open space is a walking trail, and it's a walking trail that more or less is the open space that separates the first portion of the townhomes along the southern property line between that and the Burger King and the other commercial development that's to the south of the property. So kind of creating a little open space break between the residential component and the commercial components to the south. We'll also be incorporating with this development a type A buffer around all perimeters, except for where we have punctures based on potential roadway stub outs and such like that in the entrance itself. So along that will be type A buffer, so it's a 10-foot wide buffer. That buffer will incorporate a variety of different tree species, one of some of which can be like an oak or elm tree in regards to a deciduous canopy tree. Also looking at evergreen trees such as magnolias. You're looking at cryptomeria or arborvitaes for your evergreen trees to help provide some screening on that side, but also incorporating your ornamental type trees such as redbuds and dogwoods to help add a little character and flair throughout the seasons as we go through on this side. So this is not only just a 10-foot wide type A buffer that incorporates helping to screen between the varying uses in and around this property, which to the east and to the north right now are vacant properties, but to the west is a storage facility, and to the south of the commercial development such as Burger King. This will help create some good, some good landscape character division between the different types of uses in and around the property itself. Access, as Donald talked about, our main access point is off of Highway 96. This, as I showed before, this is the image of the stub coming off the Burger King site and going into the property. As you can see on the left-hand side, it is a 3-lane configuration at the entrance to exit to Highway 96, but it's a 2-lane roadway cross-section going back to the proposed development that side. So it's a shared access easement in regards to the Burger King. As you can see, the drive-through and entrance facilities for the Burger King is actually operated off this driveway as well, and going back to our proposed development on the backside. But there is no access to the auto zone next door on the eastern side of this access drive. This is a couple of the views I presented earlier. This is, again, the view looking from the entrance, looking back down Highway 96 towards the interstate. So this is looking towards the east, towards Murfreesboro on that side, to kind of give you a little context in regards to the views. This is the view looking to the west along Highway 96 back towards if you're heading towards Franklin. And again, this is the view as if you're standing at the entrance looking into the shared driveway heading towards the development. Aside from that, we've also provided an ample amount of future stubs. As you can see, we provided a stub street to the adjacent properties that have access to Michaela Court. The intent here is that as those properties develop out is to, again, have a shared access drive through those properties back to Michaela Court from our property to provide a secondary access point back to Michaela Court and to Ag Park Drive. Also incorporated another secondary access point more in the northeast corner of the property. Again, there's a couple of properties that are behind the properties that front onto Michaela Court that have potential access to Ag Park Drive in the future. So we're providing an ample stubs location there for any connectivity for a shared driveway or a connection point back to Ag Park Drive from the northeast corner. We're also providing another stub to the north. There's a very large undeveloped tract to the north that has access not only to Ag Park Drive, as it would be developed potentially out in the future, but also back to Gresham Lane. So providing another means of ingress, egress in the future as those properties around us develop out. And again, we'll be incorporating our entrance or development signage up along Highway 96 there along the auto zone side of the development. We have room on that side for us to allow for signage. With that, I appreciate your time and consideration of this request for rezoning. I'm available for any questions now or after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Rob Wolchan? Thank you. All right, let's open our public hearing. Anyone for or against? please come forward. All right. Let's close our public hearing. Comments? Staff? Commission?
I guess I got a couple of questions. One is, typically we don't do a development this size one way in, one way out. So I guess from the staff standpoint, what's your position on that? And then two, coming off of Old Fort Parkway, it seems to me this could be a traffic issue. Have we done any traffic related studies going in and out of this thing?
Mr. Balachandra? You thought you weren't going to have to speak tonight, didn't you?
Good evening. We did talk with the developers about the connection to Michaela Court, but that's they made an attempt, but they have not succeeded in trying to get a connectivity to a signalized intersection. But we did leave that option open, so they have a stub out. They have a stub to one of the properties that actually will have access, a future access, to a signalized location through Michaela Court. But as far as a one-way in, one-way out, just like any other businesses, some of the businesses that are along 5-lane roadway, this is one that's going to have, for some time before a connection, a future connection to the back.
So coming out of, so this particular division with 148 townhomes, it's potentially 300 cars, and we feel comfortable with that coming out onto this highway?
There is a build-out period. I'm sure we can get some information on the timeline on the build-out, but it is a 5-lane roadway with a center continuous turn lane. There will be some breaks in traffic with the signals, like on Agri Park Drive and St. Andrews and Gresham on the west side.
All right, thank you. On your, Mr. Mulchan, on your patios, are they gated there in the back?
The patios themselves, I do not believe they are gated patios on those sides. I think they're more like you have in a lot of the developments right now. You've got just a little divide between those on that side. So that's kind of the somewhat typical patio experience you have with townhomes, is that divider that has a little storage area that provides that ample, more or less screening element between yourself and your neighbor next door.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Matthew, we're okay. I see that we've got 335 spaces, which looks, according to the plan document, is 20 more than what's required. Is that the way I'm reading it?
Donald reviewed this, so I will defer to him.
That's okay. Yes, it is more than required. I think when we initially reviewed this, they only had just a couple over what was required, and we had some concerns that if any of those spaces had to be converted to accessible spaces, and then you had the accessible loading zones, they would fall below the parking threshold. So they went back and found some space to add in 18 or 20 parking spaces or so. So they are over the minimum parking requirement. There's a little room to work with there, so that if some of those spaces do have to be converted, hopefully they would stay over the minimum ratio.
So it's about 2.5 per unit, something like that? My math.
Does that sound right? Sounds right.
The ordinance calls for 2.2 units based on we're using this as a two-bedroom floor plan on that side. So yeah, if you're incorporating extra, we're actually looking at an additional 20 spaces on there. We've done the townhome projects like this before. We're not required to do any accessible spaces based on any codes that require for that side. We've done one recently that you guys approved last year, similar style of architecture and development wise on that side. It had a similar one-way in and one-way out configuration in regards to that development on that side, along with stub streets on that side. So in regards to that project, we were also above and beyond the requirements based on what the ordinance calls for at 2.2. So with this additional 20 spaces, we're exceeding that 2.2. And again, remember that 2.2 is actually more than what you would call for a one bedroom, one space per bedroom basis, because you're incorporating in your extra guest spaces is what that 0.2 factors in for that factorization on that side. So you're factoring in a guest component already based on the ordinance itself, and we're exceeding that ordinance by an additional 20 spaces on that side.
All right. Anyone else? All right. What's the wishes of the commission? And before we vote, I'll make a comment. Bobby and Jewel, you guys have always done a great product in Murfreesboro, and we want this to be another great product. Just like you build everywhere else, we want this to be a great product, and we want it to look good.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against?
Nay.
Motion carries. All right, our last public hearing for the night. Proposed amendments to zoning ordinance regarding Section 7 site plan review, Section 26 off-street parking, queuing, and loading, and Chart 4 requiring off-street parking and queuing spaces by use pertaining to site plan review, minimum parking requirements of outdoor seating areas, commercial centers, and neighborhood shopping centers. City of Murfreesboro Planning Department applicant. Mr. Donald.
Thank you, sir. This is a four-part zoning ordinance revision, so let me go through those quickly, and then I'll talk a little more about a couple of the specific aspects. First, we want to resolve a conflict on how appeals to administrative site plan review conditions and decisions are handled. We have our zoning ordinance tells us two different things, and so we want to make sure that appeals of administrative site plan review come to the Planning Commission. Second, this ordinance revision would require that outdoor seating areas for restaurants, bars, commercial centers, and shopping centers be parked the same as indoor seating areas. We already apply that in practice, but this would codify it. Third, this would increase the amount of parking for commercial centers by about 11% by changing the required parking ratio from one space for every 250 square feet of floor area to one space for every 225 square feet of floor area. And fourth, this would increase the amount of parking for neighborhood shopping centers by about 10% by changing the required parking ratio from one space for every 275 square feet of floor area to one space for every 250 feet of floor area. I do want to talk briefly about how we arrived at the increases for the commercial centers and the neighborhood shopping centers. These, again, are classifications that give some relief on parking to multi-tenant centers that include some restaurant component. So with commercial centers, they can include up to 35% of the floor area as restaurant. For neighborhood shopping centers, they can include up to 30% for restaurant use of the total floor area. And instead of having to park the restaurants at 1 to 100 square feet, as is required by the ordinance, and park everything else at about 1 to 300, we give a break, recognizing that in these multi-tenant centers, not all of the tenants are going to have business at the same time. So it's a way to sort of allow some degree of shared parking in these centers. We have received some feedback from our elected and appointed officials, as well as the public, about the lack of or the perception of the lack of parking at some of our commercial centers and neighborhood shopping centers. And so to address that, we looked at different parking ratios to determine the best fit. And I just passed around a worksheet showing some different scenarios for commercial centers and neighborhood shopping centers. The first column on each chart is our scenarios of building square footages. Then you see the 1 to 250 and 1 to 275, the current parking ratios for both types. If you go all the way over to the right-hand column, if we were to actually park a shopping center at 1 to 300 for most all uses and 1 to 100 for restaurant uses, those are the parking numbers that you would get. And so while for a 10,000 square foot commercial center, an increase of 40 to 57 does not seem like much, by the time you get up to a 150,000 square foot neighborhood shopping center, an increase from 545 to 802, that would be very large. And I think the staff thinks that would lead to excessive amounts of pavement that would probably go completely unused. So what we tried to settle on was some compromise, and so that's what the third column, the 1 to 225 on chart 1 and the 1 to 250 on chart 2, those show you sort of the increases based on the ratios that we're proposing with this ordinance amendment. We think that these are modest and reasonable, and so for commercial centers you would likely see an increase of 4 to 11 parking spaces, and then for the larger neighborhood shopping centers you would see an increase of somewhere between 18 and 55 parking spaces. We'd like to put this into effect, see how it works out, see if we still have the same complaints and the same issues in the future, and if we do, we can come back and revisit this again. Again, most of the issues that we keep hearing about are with the newer shopping centers that have popular restaurant tenants. We like to eat, and when a new restaurant opens, we like to go there. And so we think over time that business will wear off just a tad on those, and everybody will move on to the next new restaurant. But certainly we want to try to be proactive and address these. We can answer any questions that you may have. We'd ask that you hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. Any questions for Mr. Hampton? If not, let's open up our public hearing. Anyone for or against, please come forward. All right, public hearing closed. Commission?
If there's no questions or comments, I'd make a motion for approval.
I have a motion, I have a second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Staff reports and other business?
Vice Chairman, staff has received some questions regarding for self-storage facilities, and what we propose to the Planning Commission. We've had a number come through in the last couple of years on locations and the actual number of them, and I must say there has been quite a few come through. If it's okay with the Commission, staff would like to look for the last 5 years, see how many we've actually had to come in, location, density, number of units, and just bring you back a report just to kind of give you some information on them. Seemed like for some reason last year we've been kind of inundated with them. Not that they're bad, I'm sure we need them certain locations, but there may be some locations that we have multitudes of them, and it's just for information purposes that we'd like to do that if that's okay.
I think that's a great idea. All right. Anything else?
I wanted to mention one thing, and this is an interesting statistic that I think that you all might find interesting since you all see all these plans come through. Our Building and Codes Department every month gives us a report of the number of permits that are issued. We had 169 single-family detached building permits issued in April. That is the most that we've had permitted. I looked back in our records. Most we've had permitted since December of 2004.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's awesome. It just tells you about the growth that's going on here in Murfreesboro. Is it anything else? If not, meeting's adjourned.